just give good evening, everyone. City Councilor Paula Fletcher, and I'm here with City Councilor and Budget Chief Shelley Carroll, and we'll be starting this as soon as everybody gets into our Zoom call. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Well, good evening, everyone. Going to start in a minute. Thank you for joining us tonight. Look forward to a really good conversation about Toronto's budget. Just took over. Did it. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. We'll let everybody have a chance to get into the Zoom room, and then we'll start. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience. We're just letting everybody get into the room before we start our budget consultation, our budget town hall tonight. Good evening, everyone. We're going to start in a minute. We're just letting everybody into the room. Thank you for your patience before we get started on the Budget Town Hall 2025. Well, good evening, everyone. It's Paula Fletcher, your city councilor, and I'm very happy that you're all here tonight. We're going to have a very interesting town hall about the city's budget with City Councilor Shelley Carroll, who's our budget chief, so she knows where all the money is, and Althea Hutchinson, the executive director of financial planning in the city of Toronto, and our mayor will be dropping in sometime this evening, coming in digitally. First of all, I'd just like to acknowledge that the land we're meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Williams Treaties that were signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. So good evening. Before we get started, really want to find a little bit about you who are here with us tonight. So we're just going to do some polling questions and you can answer them all at the same time. Here they are. Where do you live? Are you north or south of the Danforth? Maybe you don't live in Ward 14 or Toronto Danforth. Are you a homeowner, a tenant, or other? And how much do you know about the city's budget? You only have to pick one. I'm not aware, hearing about this for the first time. I know somewhat aware. I know some details, are very aware of the Toronto budget. So if you just give you a little chance to answer that, so everybody knows who's with us tonight and what level of interest or knowledge you have about the budget, because we have a lot of information for you on this budget town hall. And shortly, we will start going through an information deck for you, and you'll be learning a lot. So here we've got our answers now. Who is here? Well, Toronto Danforth, outside of Toronto Danforth, welcome people that are from outside. And then we have many people south of the Danforth, 51%, north of the Danforth, quite a few. Many of you are homeowners. The overwhelming number of you are homeowners here. And then how much do you know about the city's budget? I think, Shelley, it looks like somewhat aware, but want to find out more and know some of the details. So tonight we have what I'm going to say is a lot of people that are pretty savvy about the city of Toronto and its budget. And I'd just like to introduce you to tonight to Budget Chief Shelley Carroll.
So you're going to bring the hard questions, and we've been sitting with the budget public for just about a month now, and so we're ready to answer those questions. There's been a lot of time to digest, so be sure to bring your hard questions. How it affects you on your street, and what you want to know about the budget going forward. We always like to remind people our senior financial planner, Althea Hutchinson, is going to take you through the details of the budget. But it's interesting this year because we've talked a lot about the things we want to do on the day-to-day, the operating types of things. What doesn't get as much airplay, but something that is very important is this year's really historic investment in capital. And it couldn't come at a better time because, of course, when we go out to start to do the repair work that people ask for, rebuild and restore things, upgrading facilities, upgrading the transit system, those types of capital works, that's also a job creator. And with the events of the last couple of days, we really need to keep people working. And so making that investment now can really act as a sort of stimulus. So I can't wait for us to show you some of the details, and then we'll get down to the questions.
Shelley, you think there's only going to be questions, but I think there's going to be comments too.
Oh, I'm ready. I'm ready.
And of course, the backdrop to this tonight is all of the Trump tariffs, which we were waiting for them, but when they came, I think we're all very, very, very shocked. And the impact of that, you probably all have heard that there's a 30-day pause now that has been negotiated with the White House. So that's the good news for us tonight, but it's not going to stop our budget. We're going to have to go forward. And the mayor had us all there today to say, we're going to do what we can do in Toronto to protect the Canadian economy, to protect jobs in Toronto, to protect Toronto's economy. And that's all very good news. But let's get started with our budget highlights. And Althea Hutchinson, Executive Director of Financial Planning in the City of Toronto. It's very nice to have you with us tonight. Now, would you like to start us off on what will be a very meaty presentation, because there just is a lot to know. It's a big city, it's a big budget, and there's a lot of big things happening. So Althea, please take it away.
So thank you. Before I start, I just really want to thank you, Councillor Fletcher, for inviting me to your town hall. It's a real pleasure for me whenever I get an opportunity to present something that, of course, is near and dear to my heart. It's all about money all the time. So I'm always excited to talk about that. So the very first thing I want to say is that, and this is really important, the 2025 budget is balanced. And the reason why that's important is because it's a legislative responsibility that we have to bring in a balanced operating budget. So the operating budget is $18.5 billion this year. And when we were putting together, we were really trying to focus on a couple of things: maintain critical services, while of course making some targeted investment in some of the areas we heard about through our October budget public consultations. We also wanted to prioritize investments in terms of aligning with what I said we heard back from the community, and it's supported by a 5.4% residential property tax increase. We also have a capital budget and plan, and as Councillor Carroll indicated, it is quite significant. It's $59.6 billion. It is a 10-year plan, but it's the largest 10-year capital plan that we've brought forward within the City of Toronto. And there's a real strong focus on what we call state of good repairs for our critical infrastructures. And I'll get into this a little bit later on about, what is state of good repairs, because it's a nice buzzword that we like to use, sometimes not always well explained, but I will explain it later on. The capital budget is also supported by a 1.5% increase to the property tax, but this is targeted specifically for the city building fund, and the city's building fund really focuses on making investments in transit and housing. The other thing that I would talk about in terms of this particular budget is a couple of years ago, coming out of COVID, there was a significant budget pressure coming in, and we realized there was no way that the City of Toronto was going to be able to address that in 1 year. So we really are taking a multi-year approach in terms of how we're going to attain fiscal sustainability. The other thing I want to do is I wanted to give a little bit of a shout out to the province, because in order for us to get there, there was recognition from the provincial government, and through the actions of Mayor Chow and of course Premier Ford, they secured the New Deal agreement, and that's amazing because it has allowed us to enter into this multi-year and provide some financial support for the city, and which I'll talk about a little bit later on as well. Let's move to the next slide, please.
Just before you go there, Althea, I'm just going to say, Shelley, 5.4% residential increase. I'm not sure, that's not the highest in the GTA. Toronto is not the lead on this as far as property tax, is it?
No, currently, many cities in Canada, and certainly the cities across the GTA, are really struggling with the same thing. We're all of us really trying to deal with the deficits that may be left over from COVID. We all have to balance by law, and so across the GTA, when people take their regional increase and their city increase, we're seeing increases of like 8.4 in a couple of the majors, 7s, 6s, and 7s in the same range. And that's been the case for the last couple of years. It's also been the case in major cities across the country, because we all face some of the same challenges, and we're trying to meet those challenges with really the only main source of funds in Canadian cities, which is property tax. And property taxes they don't grow with our economy, and we're struggling. The way you can really increase the property tax pot, it's not based on your wealth. Your wealth might increase, but we're still charging your property tax based on the same set of mill rates. And so it's only by setting that inflationary increase every year that we're able to help cities grow. Toronto's not unique in respect. What we've done this year is done our level best to begin to come down from that high, which was extraordinary last year, and now we're trying to be on a downward curve, tighten up expenses, get things balanced, invest in some of the capital so that we're not having to throw good money after bad by letting things fall apart, really trying to get the city back into the good repair that people talk to us about every day.
Yeah. Thanks, Shell. So go ahead, Al. Let us know about how we're doing.
Yeah, so just riffing a little bit on what Councillor Carroll was saying there, you'll notice in this slide, on the left-hand side, there's this nice little flagpole. And what that really shows is sort of what Councillor Carroll was talking about. Last year, we started our budget process. We had a $1.8 billion opening pressure. And of course, as I indicated already, there was no way we were going to be able to bring that down to zero. Historically, our opening pressure has been anywhere from $500 to $600 million a year. So this multi-year approach that we're taking, we are starting to see it work. In 2025, we started with a $1.2 billion opening pressure. Our forecast looking out to 2026 and 2027, it is going down. So we're heading in the right direction, and that's really important. If you go to the next slide. So one of the things that, we always focus on, and Councillor Carroll touched on this a little bit, is, what revenue tools does the City of Toronto have? So one of the things we have to recognize right off the top is that a strong Toronto means a stronger Ontario, which actually means a stronger Canada. And the reason why we say that is because when you take a look at the left-hand side of this deck, you'll see how what Toronto's economic impact is. So in Ontario, 1 in 5 jobs is right here in the City of Toronto. And that's important. In terms of Ontario, we have a significant number of cranes, and cranes are a nice sort of indicator of the economic growth that's actually happening within a city, within a country. But I'm going to shift your attention to the other side of the graph, because it's a juxtaposition that you're seeing here. Because when you look on the other side of the graph, what it does is it looks at all the taxes and all the fees that you might be paying as an individual to your various orders of government. You will notice that 47% of that goes to the federal government. 44% goes to the provincial government, but only 9% actually comes to municipal government. So the City of Toronto, on average, gets 9 cents of every single dollar that you're paying, either towards taxes and fees. And when you take a look at the amount of services that a municipality like the City of Toronto has to provide, you have to recognize that there's an imbalance there. We're just not getting the amount of revenue or the amount that you're contributing into Canada in order to support, providing you those services. Next slide, please. This is another take on the multi-year approach. I'm just going to highlight a couple of things in here. One of the things that we did do last year, which was good, and when I say it's good, I'm coming from it from the perspective of the outcome. So you'll see in the second bar there, it talks about our credit rating. So for the very first time in decades, we were able to achieve a credit rating increase to AA+. And that's really significant for the city. And that was sort of a realization through our lenders and the bond markets that, we're doing something right by taking this multi-year approach in order to address our fiscal sustainability. And that actually is good, because that means that, if we do borrow funds and we raise debt to fund our capital, so that means the amount of interest that we actually have to pay goes down. And that, of course, is a savings overall for the city. There are some other items in here that are important as well, but the only other one I'm going to point to really is the last two, which is the upload of the Gardner Express and the Don Valley Expressway, which has really helped us in terms of being able to address some of the longstanding state of good repair. And I'll show you a graph later on in the deck that shows the real impact of this. And then finally, in terms of the Canada Public Transit Fund, so we got some additional funding again to support our transit, the TTC. Next slide, please. So Toronto has some systemic challenges, and I'm not going to go through everything on this deck. There's a lot there. This deck is available on the city's website. This is just a subset of a larger deck, but if you're interested in reading it, you can always go back. But the thing that's really the challenge that's systemic for Toronto is that we have over 3 million residents. And that's a 35% growth over the last 10 years. There's this growing demand for city services and supports. And we've already kind of indicated we have very, very, very limited revenue tools. And for the most part, those revenue tools do not grow with the economic growth. And what we need is we do need a sustainable long-term fiscal support from the other orders of government. Next slide, please. But that being said, the thing that amazes me about Toronto and Torontonians is that they're always rising. We're always rising to the challenge. Time after time, Torontonians have risen to the challenge in terms of our fiscal situation. And again, I'm not going to go through everything in here. The deck is available to you. But it's through the contributions, these tax increase that happened last year that we're able to achieve some of the things that we do. And I do think that Torontonians have to give themselves a pat on the back, because of the investment they've made through their property tax increase last year. And you're probably asking yourself, what did I get for last year? So if you go to the next slide, it's just an example of what did that property tax increase from 2024 actually get. It got.
Althea, I'm just going to stop you here because we now have the mayor here.
Oh,
And yeah, there she is, our mayor, Olivia Chow. Welcome, Mayor. And very nice that you're able to come by. I know how busy you are. You and Councillor Carroll were out at a big economic development piece tonight, and now you're here. But I know you like to really talk about what you were able to achieve in the budget in 2024. So that's why I've asked Althea just to take a break and let you run us through this, brag a little bit about what you were able to achieve and what we
I
did.
get a chance to talk about what we managed to achieve. That is
Yes.
wonderful. Well, looking at this slide, think about it because our city is growing. We are able to provide 24/7 citywide Toronto Community Crisis Service coverage. So when you call 211, the first response is care. And because sometimes if you have a mental health breakdown, you don't need to call 911. And then we are hiring all these firefighters, paramedics, and reduce 6 minutes of response time. And this year, because Budget Chief Shelley Carroll, which is sitting right beside you, has gone into become the chair of the police service board. She's continued the track to make sure there is a hiring plan for the police and other first responder. We have we filled 284,000 potholes. My God, 42% increase. Not enough because just yesterday I went through one that was in Etobicoke and the car just went boom, boom. And I thought, oh my God, our roads are really old. We need to continue to repave our road. We're just catching up right now. And sometimes it's infuriating that this driver would drive out in the middle of the road and block everybody because the light have just turned, and no one, because they're right at the intersection, no one could go north or south or east and west because this driver is blocking it. Is infuriating. So this is what traffic agents can do. And when I started this term, there were 2 of them. We are now going to get 100 of them. Last year, we have 24. And what we have noticed is that when they're around, no one dare to block the intersection. And the streetcars, like the King Street car, is moving 3 times faster, which really helps everybody. Last year, we froze transit fares, and as a result, with 6% increase, 25 million more rides at TTC because we increased the service and froze the fares. And this year, we'll continue again under our fearless leader, Budget Chief. We are freezing the fares again and increasing the service. We are building affordable housing. Councillor Fletcher, remember the joy that we experienced when in the Riverdale Co-op? What was her name? That woman that had finally able to move back into a beautiful unit, completely renovated. She showed me the unit. She was so proud of it because it's bright, a lot of lights, and it was just magnificent. So we are building a lot of housing, affordable housing. We are doing it last year. We are continuing to do it this year. We moved 3,800 people from shelters into homes. And now we are opening libraries 7 days a week. We are feeding more kids. We are opening up the community centers with more activities. We have now growing a lot of youth hubs this year, up to 50 plus, and they're enormously popular. They're in libraries and community centers, after school, high school kids, rather than just going to the mall or go home and just play video game by themselves or, just screen time. They are in the library doing homework, learning from each other, their program, and these youth hubs are enormously popular and it's packed with young people. And we have now over 50 plus. And last year, of course, we had 28 and it 22% increase, and we continue on the track. So this slide not only talk about 2024, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit, and we are increasing all of those things that are here, making life more affordable by building more housing, feeding a lot more kids, like 25,000 more kids. We are getting Toronto moving, more TDC services, no fare increase, and also traffic agents. So thank you for allowing me to say a few words. This budget that Councillor Carroll and yourself, Councillor Fletcher, put together that are coming for a vote at council on February 11th in 8 days have been informed by 20, before the new year was like, it's just 22,000. And then we went and spoke to thousands more people. And tonight, almost 100 people. We keep improving it a little bit, right? There's going to be a bit of improvement on the 11th, on the last council. So we are hearing your concerns, hearing your voices, and I just want to, Councillor Fletcher, thank you for allowing me to say a few words, and Councillor Carroll, Budget Chief, thank you for letting me say a few words also. Now, I will be remiss if I don't talk about the Trump tariff, okay? Because it will have, it's going to be hard. I know we got a 30 days reprieve, and both of you joined me today to say we need to protect our local economy and we need to support our local residents. So we are encouraging people to buy local. We are keeping our reserve funds in case there's rainy days ahead. And also, we are encouraging people to support each other if there's tough times ahead. Now, Mr. Trump might change his mind. You never know. But one thing we know, we are always stronger together. And in the last 12 months, ever since I've been elected, I've been working hard with the federal and the provincial government to make sure that we have the New Deal, that we have extra investment to the city of Toronto, and by and large we've done quite well. So I don't need to go into all the things we've done with the federal and the provincial government, but by working together, we've been able to provide more funds to the city of Toronto, so that for the first time, not only are we able to start fixing the TDC, not only can we start fixing the community center and all that, our credit rating has also gone up, so which is great. It's saving us money. So thank you for allowing me to say a few words. As buy local, shop local, and continue on this track and build a caring and affordable city and keep each other safe. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for joining us, Mayor. You're welcome to stay on if you'd like and comment, or I know how busy you are, so it's really up to you. You might want to stay and talk a little bit more about what 2025, what you're planning to put in that budget, because at the end of the day, this is your budget, and thank you for going through all of the amazing number of things that happened in 2024. I'm going to turn this back, and thanks everybody. You've got questions and comments in the chat, and we'll come to all of those later. Councillor Carroll really wants wants to answer a couple. She said, I want to answer that one. So we'll get to those folks. Don't worry. And Althea, we'll just turn that right back over to you now to just look at the 2025 operating budget.
Yeah, absolutely. If you could move to the next slide, please. So this is, I've already spoken about some of these items in here. As I indicated, our operating budget is $18.8 billion in 2025. We did start out with an opening pressure of $1.2 billion. It has been resolved. Our budget is balanced as it needs to be. And as I indicated, it is predicated on a property tax increase of 5.4%. The city, in developing this year's budget, there's a strong commitment to maintaining critical services, continuing to strengthen our intergovernmental relationship, as well as I indicated before, that multi-year approach in order for us to move towards the state fiscal sustainability. And as the mayor has already indicated, a lot of what we did was based on public consultations that we did throughout October as well. Next slide, please. So this is just a graphical representation of how the $18.8 billion is broken out. On the left-hand side, you'll notice it's a small little one, but you'll notice that we've got sort of two major areas that we kind of talk about. The rate-supported programs, and that would be Toronto Water, Solid Waste Management, as well as the Toronto Parking Authority. And then the darker blue, those are the programs that are actually supported through the tax base. On the right-hand side, the bar graphs that kind of go across, the story behind that one is that when you take a look at sometimes I'm not sure if it's orange or if it's a yellowy orange, that's actually what your property tax is buying. So if you're paying property tax on the operating side, that 5.4, that's what it's purchasing. And you'll notice that there's also some larger blue lines. Those are other forms of revenue. The very first line there is what we call our cost share program. So these are programs like children's services, public health, and paramedics, for example, where the city actually receives funding from other orgs of government in order to support the delivery of those programs. So that makes up 27% of it. The next line is transit. And that one, you'll notice that it's almost 50-50 in terms of what the tax supports. And the blue line would be revenue that's generated through the fare box or through advertisements. So it gives you a good visual presentation of what the property tax is actually buying, to use that term, versus what other sources of revenue is bringing to bear. Next slide, please. So I report to the CFO and treasurer for the city of Toronto, and I swear this is his most favorite slide. He loves this slide. He really does. I'm warming up to it. And the reason why I'm warming up to it, because I actually think it's a great visual presentation. And it's a good talking point for us to kind of talk about, the property tax increase that was there. If you look, there's a large red column there. And that red column indicates, to scale, the $1.2 billion opening pressure that we faced. Then if you look, and it's kind of small on my screen, but if you take a look right beside this, this tiny little green sliver. And what that little green building, that very low rise is what 1% property tax would actually generate, which is about $46 million. So when you take a look at the red one versus the green one, I'm realizing right now those are actually Christmas colors. We should maybe rethink those. But when you take a look at it, if we were going to, and then I'm about to say this is hypothetical, if we were going to fund our opening pressure based upon the tax base, that would have been a 26% property tax increase. That was never going to happen. But then if you juxtaposition that and say, well, okay, let's just cut services. If you were to cutting services would be basically wiping out the TTC and Wheel-Trans. That's what it actually equates to. Now, we couldn't do either one of those things. We had to find a different way to balance our budget. And if you go to the next slide, I'm going to explain to you how we actually got to a balanced budget. Next slide, please. So the nice orange, or not so nice, but that's the opening pressure of $1.2 billion. And right off the bat, we actually were able to bring forward reductions in offsets. So this is things like looking at what we call line by line reviews. That's where we look at our budget more or less, and we look at 5 years to see how much money are we actually spending? Do we actually need that budget? And if we don't, we say that, to program areas, you're not going to be getting that budget. We also looked at real true efficiencies. And one of the ones that we did this year, for example, is we had some contract savings where we went back and renegotiated our contracts. And we also did things like looking at, fuel pricing, utility costs. We really did deep dives in order to achieve that 528. But you'll notice that there's a little note there. So we didn't just do 528. We actually did 680. Because before we even got to the opening pressure of 1.2, we'd already identified $152 million. The next item was we had some more revenue tools that brought us another $41 million in. And those were, one of my staff calls it, I think people are colloquially calling it the mansion tax. So if you own a property that's over $3 million, and you are purchasing that property, you are paying a higher amount in terms of the land transfer tax. And then the next one is what we call the temporary bridging strategies. So those are reserves that we had as part of our multi-year approach in order to come back to fiscal sustainability. But the pivotal point there, it is temporary. So over the next couple of years, we do have to find a way to find permanent funding sources to make up that gap. And that could come through a variety of ways. The next one, of course, is the property tax, which is 5.4, so smaller than the 26 that we might have had to have done, which was never going to be on the table. And finally, we had some additional funding coming through from the federal government to support some of our refugee claimant response. If you move to the next step, please. So Mayor Chow indicated, she spoke a little bit to this. This was what happened in October in terms of our public consultations. So more than 12,000 individuals actually completed the online surveys. There were 6 city-led facilitated sessions, 763 participants. And then on top of all that, we also worked with community groups to have their own engagement sessions, predominantly with equity deserving residents, including Indigenous and Black individuals. And we had about 331 participants there. Next slide, please. So
Althea, this is the one I'm going to now let the mayor, I'm going to let the mayor take this one away, because here is the plan and her plan for what these funds will be used for. So Mayor Chow, take it away. You have to take, you're muted for this slide, Olivia. Oh, maybe something's happened to the feed. Go ahead, Althea. She can't hear me.
Sure. So part of the budget includes investments based upon what we heard through public consultations. So we heard that people wanted us to make life affordable. They wanted to get Toronto moving. They wanted to provide more community services, and they wanted to focus on keeping people safe. So as the mayor was saying earlier on, some of the investments that were made in 2024, we continue to invest in some of those key areas. For example, the school food program is expanding. And not only are we expanding food for children through the school program, introduced this new this year, is we're going to support providing food to children when they're not in school over the summer camps through the Camp TO. There was also some increases to the rent ban program in terms of keeping life affordable. And there were some also added, this is of course is just a sample of some of the investment. It's not all of the investments. In terms of keeping Toronto moving, again, for the second year in a row, fares were frozen again for the second year in a row. And also there's another increase of another 500,000 hours. So that will be between 2024 and 2025. We're talking about another 1 million hours of operating service hours for the TTC. There was also a strong focus, as the mayor already indicated, in terms of increasing the number of traffic agents are there to deal with the frustration of being stuck in the box. So we're going to have 100 traffic agents by the end of this budget cycle. In terms of providing community services, more expansion to the Toronto Public Libraries, expanding cleaning and recreational facilities, expanding pool hours by 2 hours every single day during the summer season, and also a strong focus because we heard that people were interested in culture and local arts and festivals and events, so investments in that area as well. In terms of keeping individuals safe, we're continuing to invest in the emergency services positions in terms of fire, police, and paramedics. A strong investment, again, in terms of supporting our youth in targeting youth violence prevention program, as well as expanding some of our road safety programs as well. Next slide, please. And all of this is possible through, as we indicated, our major tool, revenue tool, which is the property tax. So there are two slides that are going to deal with property tax here. And the very first one is talking about, if you are an owner of a resident, then the property tax increase is 5.4%. But even though recognizing that, there are some challenges for individuals, particularly seniors and individuals with disabilities, the city does have a property tax relief program. And as Mayor Chow indicated about a week or so ago, when she released her budget, we did increase the eligibility criteria by almost 5% to $60,000, which I think is good news because it'll be able to allow us to expand the availability of that program. In terms of living in a mostly residential, it's half the amount. And there's also another program that's there that will provide some relief as well if you are in a new multi-residential building. Next slide, please. If you happen to be a business owner, this is where the property tax amounts are showing out. If you're commercial, it's 2.7. If you happen to own an industrial one, it's 5.4. And again, if you're a small business owner, there are actually rate reductions for small business owners, recognizing again that, we do harping back to making life affordable, and also recognizing that we do, small business usually is the backbone to any economy, and making sure that, we're able to provide relief programs where we can. Next slide, please. In terms of additional things, there are rate increases that are coming for Toronto Water as well as Solid Waste Management. Both of those organizations, they're increasing the rates by 3.75%. In terms of, what does that mean for you as a consumer? In terms of your water, if you consume on average 230 cubic meters of water, it's another $39 a month. If you are solid waste, it depends on the size of your bin that you have, whether or not it's $11 to $21. And I'm sorry, I was remiss in not mentioning how much the property tax increase would be in the previous slide, and it would be 200 and, let's see if I can go from memory here, $210 per month annually. So these are the rate increases. What's interesting about these rate increases is it isn't just for the day-to-day operations of these services. It also funds their capital replacement. So this would be making sure that your water is actually showing up, the water trunks, the water pipes. In terms of solid waste, it would be their equipment that they use in order to pick up our garbage. So next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk about the capital plan. Again, largest capital plan ever, $59.6 billion. It's almost a $10 billion increase over last year's capital plan. And that $10 billion, it comes into three areas, basically $5 billion for transit mobility, another $2 billion for community services, predominantly through our parks, another $2.5 billion investments for flood protection, and also helping the City of Toronto achieve its net zero target by 2024. As Councillor Carroll indicated, given what's happening right now with our neighbors to the south, we weren't necessarily anticipating this, but building capital budgets usually are stimulus budgets. So they create jobs, they create opportunities, they create employment. So this budget is going to support us in that front. In terms of the budget, significant investment into state of good repairs. So that's our bridges that are maybe they need to be repaired. That's the recreation facilities that need to be repaired in order for them to stay like in operating in a good state of operations. And this is important because you want to invest into what you have to maintain what you have, because it just costs so much more if you neglect it and you have to repair it later or you have to replace. It's always better to, it's sort of preventative to do these investments. 54% of our plan is going that. That's $32.4 billion is going to be invested in here. That's an increase of 31% over the last 2 years. So significant. And not only that, we're really focusing this year on investing into our carbon budget. The number isn't here, but it's roughly around $14 billion is actually linked to our carbon budget. And we're able to, sorry, go ahead.
May I jump in? This is all numbers that wow, this is like, billions of dollars. Oh, whoa, $60 billion. Wow. Okay, what does that mean?
Next slide.
Actually, Councillor Carroll and Fletcher would tell you that it has been really frustrating. In the past, the TDC is falling apart because everything is old. And it just, every year, things don't get fixed. So you walk into a subway station, if it's pouring rain outside, if you go into St. Patrick's Station, it's pouring water, right? It's leaking. And then the tracks sometimes are broken. The signals doesn't work. And then there's service disruption. It is so frustrating. So because we were able to get the new deal, uploaded the Garner, we saved, I think Shelley helped me out. I think it's $1.2 billion that we were able to.
It's almost 2 billion. It's 1.9 billion. And that's
1.9, almost $2 billion.
That was money we spent every 10 years into perpetuity.
That is the capital dollars, because one of the questions that I saw being asked in the chat isn't the New Deal only for 3 years? Well, only for 3 years on the operating side, which is great. First time we got operating dollar for TDC, huh? And but the capital side, we're able to take that $2 billion that we don't have to spend fixing the Garner because it's always falling apart. Rebuilding it is expensive. We're now able to put it in the biggest capital budget ever to fix the public transit, to fix the, build some new washrooms because they are really old, community centers, libraries, all the things that you just saw. And those are really important things to do. It's called state of good repair, because if we don't fix things, yes, it will cost a lot more, like bridges. We've been not fixing it. The roads, because we're not fixing it, that's why there's so many potholes. So because of the New Deal, we're able to put in so much money in the capital budget. Okay, I just want to jump in and explain that because I saw that was one of the questions that was in the chat. Okay, sorry, turning it back to you.
Oh, no worries. If you could just go to the next slide there. Sorry. So I think this is what the mayor was really focusing on. So what are you getting? Like, what is this plan getting? So we're getting new subway cars. We're getting new e-buses with the charging stations. We're going to really focus in on state of good repair and making sure the transit is available, and not only just available, but it's reliable, which is important for our economy and for getting people moving around. We're also going to be overhauling busings and streetcars and subway cars. So in a very tangible way, in terms of, I talked about the $60 billion. This is the tangible things that you're going to see. In terms of the transportation services, we're going to see the city bridges and road rehabilitations, and also looking at, the net zero or vision zero road safety plans and what projects we can bring to bear so that people can feel safe as they're traversing through the city. Next slide. Another example of.
Althea, we're just going to go back to that slide or about the city building fund because
Oh, sure, sure.
the tax
There's a
increase.
question about that?
And yes, thank you. And then there's the city building fund, and budget just reminded me that that fund actually was started by Mayor Rockport. Isn't that right?
Yeah, a lot of
Pay for
people,
transit.
a lot of people forget it. It started back then, and you know, we're seeing the rewards in the investment this year. It started back during Mayor Ford's time. He had a separate levy to build the Scarborough subway, and so we would always have the property tax increase plus the Scarborough subway levy. Well, now that's a provincial partnership project. Mayor Tory decided to continue it on and begin to call it the city building fund, because making that separate investment and making sure that we're tucking it away to spend on capital, not on the operating services, to really do the repairs and buy the vehicles and such. What that means is that anytime the other orders of government come forward and say, okay, I would like to buy you some subway cars, but the city has to kick in their third. Or we've got a new affordable housing program, but the city has to kick in a third. The city building fund is to make sure that we can take advantage of those opportunities without becoming too mired in debt. We're actually in a very manageable position debt-wise because we've managed the rate of debt very carefully, and now with a higher credit rating, the cost of borrowing is much cheaper for us. The higher your credit rating, the lower your rate of borrowing will be. And so this city building fund, it's been in place now for a little over 10 years, but it really is the reason we can dedicate this much. Finally, it has accumulated to where we can make this major investment, because the thing that we hear every day, and the thing that the mayor certainly heard in election time in 2023, is fix what is broken. And these are the results with that city building fund investment and your investment as Torontonians. We can really double down on those fixes.
Like a special savings account.
Yes, only we hunkered down and didn't rate it until we really needed it. Unlike my Christmas account that is never there by Christmas.
Sorry, Althea, keep going, will you please?
No, it's an excellent point, because that funding is very targeted. It's targeted towards transit and is targeted towards housing, which are through the public consultations, we heard a lot about those two items. And as Councillor Carroll has indicated, she's absolutely correct. We matched when we got funding from the federal and the provincial government to support some of the investments we're making in transit. We had the funding that was there that we could say, okay, and here's our share. We didn't have to scrounge and find it. We didn't have to borrow to find it. We said, here it is. And of course, I think that reflects back on the investment that Torontonians have made, and reflecting back on one of the comments I made earlier about how, the city's constantly just stepping up to challenges, and really give yourselves a pat on the back, right? Because you've done the right things in the past that are really coming and paying off now. In terms of,
really good point about the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, because that's the formula for transit. That's the formula for the waterfront and the housing, that every level of government pays a third. And this allows us to be able to get ante-in for our third with ease, and be able to do the big things that I know people really love. They love the idea of the waterfront being developed. They're very excited about it. And this means we're not saying we can't. So that's great. Thank you for that explanation. Keep going.
Yeah. So here we have just some more examples of, what we're spending the money on in terms of, that 59.6 billion. So, and this isn't all that's in the plan. This is just the incremental that's been added to the plan this year. So there's another $2 billion that we're going to invest in housing and community improvements. And again, the things that people really enjoy on a day-to-day basis. These are your rec centers. For those, it's about having affordable housing, having a roof above your head. And there's a lot of investments going into that, as well as the Toronto Community Housing Building Repairs. So we've all heard about, the state of these buildings. So again, it was nice to be able to have this influx of funding that we could actually provide. And finally, another one around housing, which is the homeless services infrastructure. And that's basically, providing shelter supports. This particular investment, I think, is worth highlighting because you're spending money on the capital, but you're building shelter space. And what that ultimately does is that it actually is a savings in a roundabout way, because you'll save money in the operating, because it is just so much more expensive to actually house individuals through shelter spaces, or even through hotels when we don't have enough capacity within our own and we have to go out and purchase these spaces. So again, a wise and prudent investment for the City of Toronto. Next slide, please. So I talked about this. This is one of the exciting news about our state of good repair. That graph that's on the side, if you look at the red line, I'm pointing at the red line as if you guys can see me pointing at it. But if you look at the red line, you'll notice that trajectory is going up. So I've spent some time in my career in public health, and we like this thing called flattening the curve. And the investment that we've made this year into our state of good repair through this capital plan, it's actually flattening that curve. It's hard to see the number, but last year, by the time we would have hit 2023, the amount of how much we'd have to invest for our assets to actually be in a good state of good repair would have been around $23 billion. The investments that we're making this year into our capital plan by focusing on a state of good repair, it has brought that cost down to just a little bit above 18. That is a significant thing, because again, it saves us money in the long run. And that's what's really important, is saving that money in the long run. If you go to the next, there's more information on there that you can read at your pleasure. I want to give people opportunities for questions. So again, just a quick summary, $18.8 billion in terms of operating, $59.6 billion in terms of the capital, based upon two components of the tax increase, 5.4% for the operating, 1.5% for the capital, but very targeted towards transit as well as housing. And I think that takes me to the end of my presentation. So thank you for bearing with me as I went through so many numbers, but hopefully, there'll be opportunities to respond to questions.
Well, thank you very much, Althea. You actually made the budget sound really exciting. And that's great, because it can be very dry, and we really appreciate you being here and running us through that. We do have a lot of questions in our Q&A, and we're going to get to some of those. But first, we're just going to ask you to tell us what you think about certain parts of the budget. I think these questions were used in the consultation, but let's hear what you have to say tonight, and then we'll let you know what everybody thinks on this. This is the key areas of investment. What are the most important ones to make? Affordable housing, reliable transit, police and safety, other priorities that we haven't listed here. And three areas for cuts were outlined. Where would you cut? Police, environment, climate, support to Toronto business, something else. And then which one here is, how do you think we should respond to safety? New Toronto crisis, EMS paramedics, police, or fire. And then lastly, do you think Toronto has to prepare for the impact of US tariffs? Yes, no, or maybe you're not sure, because we don't really know enough about everything yet. So let's have you answer those. We'll let you know what you've got to say, and then we'll get into some of the really interesting questions. And one of them here is, what are some of the examples of the projects in the Vision Zero road safety plan? I think, Shelley, you're able to give us some ideas about that.
Well,
okay, you can answer that one while everybody's voting. Go ahead.
Well, I selfishly speak for suburbs when I say that one of the biggest things in Vision Zero this year is going to be catching up the neighborhoods that need to go down to 30 kilometers around schools and inside subdivisions. We're actually behind you up in the suburbs where I represent. And so There's a lot of that work going on, but there's also an investment in there for an increase in the automated speed enforcement cameras, 75 new cameras. And remember, that's always the challenge because with those cameras, you have to also have the humans to look at the data and issue the tickets. That's how you get the effect from that. So that will be happening. The congestion traffic wardens, the mayor's already spoken to, and it's important for people to remember. Well, the traffic wardens, they can't necessarily issue tickets. What they do in those key intersections downtown will be able to increase the number of intersections this year. Is their focus is the pedestrians being able to get safely through that intersection while still being able to flow the traffic that wants to turn left or right. And so they're very pedestrian focused. And we think of them as a newfangled part of Vision Zero, but a part of Vision Zero nevertheless. So those investments are being made. The cameras alone will be $7.8 million to get them in place, and then have for 75 cameras, 13 people reviewing the data, issuing tickets, and taking those through the courts. And we are seeing the results. If you look into the budget notes on transportation, they're all up on the city's website. What we do at the beginning of each budget, we don't just talk about last year to brag about what we did last year, but they actually measure if we spent money in that area, did it work? Are we seeing things go down? And pedestrian accidents with serious injuries are going down. Cycling is still a challenge. We got a lot of educating to do for everyone who's either on the bike or near the bike, in a vehicle or a pedestrian. We're still working that out, but the numbers are going down. And so there's further investment this year because we know if we can slow people down, we're going to make progress on zero deaths.
Thanks, Shelley. We're just going to say good night to you, Mayor Chow, before we look at these results, because you've got a big press conference tomorrow. Thanks so much for being with us tonight. We really appreciate it. Looking forward to all the good work within the next week before we get to our actual budget vote. So thank you.
Thank you. Can I say what the press conference is about? Just a early tip. Tomorrow is when parents can register their kids for Camp TO, summer camping programs, right? Day camps. And the city of Toronto run thousands and thousands of these wonderful day camps all across Toronto. And this year there's something special. Should I talk about it? I guess it's part of the program. Sure.
Yeah, it's part of I think it's part of our budget.
So, that's right. Yeah. That's right. This year, because last year in the summertime, I went to visit quite a lot of recreation community centers, and I see all these kids playing. I talked to some of the camp counselor. I said, wow, kids are having a great time. And I said, well, okay, this is a full day thing. Do they bring their lunch? She said, yeah, most of them do. Oh, most? Some don't? Yeah, some of them don't because they maybe parents don't have time, but mostly because the parents don't have. They don't have the wherewithal to actually pack a lunch. I thought, oh my God. I reminded myself, 1 out of 10 Torontonians use the food bank. And sometimes, in some days, there's just not much left. And I thought, oh my God. And I said to the camp counselors, what happened then? And they said, well, yeah, there's not a lot we can do with a little bit of little snacks, but I said, they're hungry for the whole day. He said, yeah, sometimes their friends share what they have, but yeah, some of them do remain hungry. I thought, oh my God. Because we have school food program, not in every school, but in, over half the school. And we want to, by the end of 2026, we want every school to have at least a mid-morning meal. But that's during school hours. But in the summer, you just, some kids just can't afford it. So this year we are doing a Camp TO food program, not a full lunch, but a little bit of something, and nutritious food, free food groups. And we're going to be able to feed 31,000 kids. And that is part of the budget plan that will be in front of us in in 8 days. So I don't know what people think about it, but I'm going to be talking about it tomorrow. So thank you so much for letting me share a bit of time. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for caring so much about kids and in the city, because you certainly do. You always were as a city councilor, a metro councilor, and now as mayor, you are a champion for families. So thank you, Mayor. Good night. We'll see you shortly tomorrow. Okay, bye. Here's our poll results now, and we're going to say, what would you like? Most important investment, affordable housing and shelter and transit. That is, doesn't surprise me here with all the good people in our ward. What would you cut? Police, top. And where should most of the investment go for safety? Our new Toronto community crisis service, which I know you know a lot about, Shelley. And then should we prepare for the tariffs? Yes, yes, double yes.
Yes.
From everybody who's on this. So that's where we're at. Someone had asked, why has crime increased? Shelley, do you want to just answer that one? Because that was one of the questions in the chat.
Yeah, there was some talk of this in the media a few days back. The mayor talked about crimes that are going down, and then someone asked Chief Demkew the very next day about crimes going up. And of course, there are many different kinds of crime. We very definitely do have a youth violence problem right now. We're actually partnering with other orders of government. There's investment in this budget to address the youth violence problem and prevention of youth violence through other choices. Those things are happening, but there are crimes that are going down. Car theft, for instance, which has been a national problem and was a scourge across the city, is down because of the investment we made last year, and the special unit that could be created is down 23%, and that was a stat taken in October. It's probably even improved from that now. Break and enters, which was a rising problem, is now going down, but there are still the effects of organized crime and the drug trade and youth violence. That's why we have to remain ever vigilant. We have to continue to work on safety and training. Important to note, though, I know that some people are concerned with the investment in police. This is really a matter of a multi-year approach to keeping pace with the growth in population. That's one area where in the first responders, that's why the mayor's making investments with all three, paramedics, fire, and police, in numbers of officers. But what we've done through our budget process this year is really pushed hard with each of those first responders to say, look, if we're going to make investments in the officers themselves getting boots on the ground, you have to look for efficiencies everywhere else. We still have to set a target for you, and you need to meet that target. And so the police very much came in at target by finding on the non-uniform side great efficiencies, and we'll expect the same next year if they're to have the investment to get to that proper ratio of population to police officers. We're well down compared to other Canadian cities, and we compare ourselves to Canadian cities because in the United States, that ratio isn't as meaningful because those are cities with a lot of guns. But compared with other cities, we still have a little way to go, but we'll do it gradually and finding efficiencies on the flip side.
Thank you. And someone said, did you give credit to Rob Ford for that city building fund? Well,
it is a blue moon. Yes, I did.
It's where it started because we had no money to pay for the Scarborough subway, and he wanted so badly, he actually agreed to that. So that's been in place since then.
And I've always believed it. You have to give credit where credit's due. If you're really going to build a responsible budget, you can't be partisan about it. If a good financial decision is made, and some of his financial decisions I did not agree with and ended up being quite wasteful. But if you do something right, it deserves a shout out.
There you go. Someone wants to know why the city should have to ask the province for all the power to do things, but that's because of the Canadian Constitution that gives the province basically super control over our city. And you've seen that over and over again with bike lanes, with cutting the council, with just about anything that can happen. And we don't know what the latest is with the province, with the bike lanes. A few of you have been asking about that, but I don't think we have any update on that. And nothing can happen while this provincial election is on anyway. So thank you for that. Shelley, you asked her about the Vision Zero, but I think really and truly one of the thing is the opening pressure. Can you,
Oh,
there's an
sure.
opening deficit, an opening, we talk in a certain language. We use a language. We talk about SOGR, state of good repair. We talk about opening pressures. That's not how normal people speak, right? We're all normal. We speak a different language. So let's just try to make this one clear here on what does that really mean? The tax increase for property tax is 5.4, but what is the city building fund? That is on top, but that's always been on top of no matter what the
Right.
tax increase was. So how to go with that?
It's important to note, though, the opening pressure is really about what's wrong with the formula that we use in Canada to fund cities. And this is why we find ourselves in the challenge we're in. We're trying to do a lot with property taxes, and we're especially trying to address all growth with property taxes. People say, with all these condos going up, why do you need money? Can't these new condo owners just give you more money? Aren't they paying property taxes? Well, they are. But think about the services that you expect to come along with the property taxes you pay. So someone moves into a condo in the city of Toronto and they pay their property taxes, they will expect the same level of services. And so often what we need to do to grow those services to meet the population demands, and then also to address emerging challenges. We never expected to see the amount we're having to invest in shelter and homelessness services during a difficult economy right now. And while that's a cost shared service, those dollars don't always come from the other orders of government in a timely fashion. And so we're topping them up with property taxes. We because we're unlike other cities in Canada, where the province funds a substantial part of the operating budget in transit. We're unique in that we don't get that. Right now we're getting a little from the New Deal, but there isn't a predictable, sustainable contribution to the TTC day-to-day operating budget, such for 25 years from the early 70s all the way to 1995. So we're into over 25 years now of not having that predictable source of funds for our transit system. So what it does is it grows with the growth of the city and the growth in the demand for ridership and service in our mobility services. Every year, the amount of new expense from the previous year grows every year. And the budget exercise, looking at the growth and then little by little looking at how we're going to winnow it down. People sometimes say to us, well, what are the cuts? That gets to be the meaning. Every division is given a target that they have to meet to help us control our expenses. And when they arrive at financial planning and the analysts take a look, if they haven't met the target, they start looking at how they're going to meet their efficiencies, just staff to staff, before it even gets to the politicians, to get them down to that financial management level that has been set before we're even looking at it. That was a tough process this year, wasn't it?
Sorry, I think I'm having some internet issues.
Sorry, everybody. We just had a little technical problem here and lost our Zoom feed. Just when I was talking about all the other
There you go, we're
cities
back.
that pay a lot more property taxes than we do. The internet froze, but we're back. And thanks for hanging in there. I just had that list of all the cities that have a higher rate, pay more than we do in the city of Toronto: Windsor, London, Hamilton, Kitchener, Ottawa, Hamilton, and Mississauga. So that's a lot that
And
are
that's on a
paying more.
dollar basis.
And that's a
not
dollar to
percentage.
dollar.
Yeah.
That's right. Windsor's paying a lot more, and only Richmond Hill, Vaughan, and Markham have a lower rate. So I don't know about
yeah.
that being the new normal, but
Well, it has been challenging, but we know that there are tough times ahead. That's why you'll remember that Althea described that the goal in this multi-year plan is to get that opening pressure down, and thus we can get the increase down. That's why it's down from last year by a little over 2.5 points, and we would like to do the same again next year. But it's going to take a lot of discipline, and we're going to have to do that in the face of whatever economic uncertainty is coming from our friend to south of the border. But what it's going to mean is real vigilance, and we're really painfully aware of what we've asked of people. It's a lot about really sort of correcting what was an odd phenomenon. This is the only megacity in North America, really, where your tax rate goes down as you get closer to the core city. The norm in Manhattan, Chicago, and places is that the highest rates of taxes are in the core city, and you move out of town for things to get cheaper. We've had the inverse for many years. Now, having asked these investments of you, we're now at a point where we're about middle of the pack, and that's where we want to stay. But it's going to mean financial management, good people like Althea and our CFO, riding that hard, controlling expenses, and really getting the fixes done so that we're over the hump and getting back to a state of good repair such that we can now manage services well, and you can have the quality of life you want as you move throughout the city. And if that's the case, then we want to see a downward curve in those rates, get back to where it really is more closely tied to inflation.
Thank you, Shelley. We have someone asking about other types of money outside of property taxes, but we do have a number of things.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Thank you. When Mayor Miller was mayor, and you were the budget chief at that time, Councillor, again, that we had the land transfer tax that became something that we could raise money from, and a few other things. We have the 1.5% city building fund that no matter what the tax rate is, that 1.5% goes into that savings account that's for big things. We save for big things for our lives. Well, that's what that one is. So that already is a bit diversified, and I don't know what other options there might be, but that already happens here in Toronto.
Well, the key is to find a source of revenue that actually would solve the problem. If we want to get out of this chronic, fretful issue that happens every year, we really want to solve the problem. And that means things like looking at what is that opening pressure gap. As Althea mentioned earlier, our chief financial planner, it usually equates to, when you get down to the normal pressure, which will be the first time since COVID, so we're hoping to be there next year, where the opening pressure is between 600 million, 700 million. If we were still living under the old days when we had a transit deal between the premier of the province, this is a long time ago. We're talking about Premier Bill Davis, which some here won't even remember. But in those days, if that deal was still in place, that is about how much we would be getting from the province every year to run the operating system. It would be now about 650 million a year, so that we would be putting in half what we put into the transit system through property taxes right now. So some sustainable, predictable, some like that from the province would really solve that pressure and leave us with the funds to invest properly in the city without having to have exorbitant tax increases. Another model is to really look at the model that exists in other parts of the world, in the States, in Europe, in Asian cities, which is that they have access to the economy just for the city government, either through a share of income tax or a share of consumer sales tax. For instance, if we were to receive 1% of the HST to be used specifically in the city, that would equate to $1 billion a year. And with that $1 billion a year, imagine being able to take away one of those columns in that bar graph sheet of paper that Althea showed earlier. Imagine funding the whole transit system with that 1 billion. It would just be the fare box plus the billion, regulate spares, and it leaves that billion left to be invested in services so that we're not coming back to dip into your pocket at high rates indefinitely. And so those are the kinds of things that in the long term we really need to look at. And the Premier has indicated that he knows that post 2026 he has to come back to look at New Deal Part 2. And fortunately, we're in an election now, but the other party leaders have indicated they would, of course, do the same thing. They would sit down and talk about what's a real sustainable formula.
Thanks, Shelley. We do have a question about keeping the affordable houses that Toronto Community Housing had and not selling them. Just quickly, all of the numbers of bedrooms that exist in all of those homes would have to be rebuilt under the law and the rent geared to income law. So that's really why that's happened. And I know people have asked that question before, but it is a way. We do have affordable housing in our neighborhood. We maintain large homes, number of bedrooms. It's no cheaper to sell them all. Actually, it's probably more expensive because by the time you've done that and you've rebuilt everything, it's actually going to cost you more. Shelley, let's do a few other ones here that we have people writing in. And what about some just streetcar priorities? Those necessarily aren't in the budget, but we can't really add in a separated lane for streetcars in the old city of Toronto. We have great once the Eglinton Crosstown opens, oh, hallelujah, that's all separated and it's a great thing to do. We're really hoping that that opens very, very soon. Although it's not really something that we're in control of. That is a provincial project. And a number of people are saying they know of some great shops. They love the shops for shopping local. You talked about let's shop local. Let's make sure we do that. The mayor did as well. But the city can't put out a list of places where you should shop. We'd get in a lot of trouble. I think we'd get in a lot of trouble if we were to do that. Shelley?
Yeah, we can't order you to shop at a specific place. And we often talk too about it's not so easy to buy local. What products are made locally? If I want to go to the bulk store and pick up something to decorate a birthday cake, am I buying a Canadian product? How am I going to know? But we were joking today. There are enough brilliant young creative minds in the city. We were asking ourselves, is someone right now developing an app to sell to the grocery store that says, here, people can scan anything in your store and it will tell them the percentage of Canadian product? I think those things are probably being developed right now. But what we hope also is that this becomes a negotiation project between the two nations and even the three with Mexico coming in. If we scrap this free trade deal, he's going to have a problem in his own backyard. And so there'll be pressure to renegotiate. Okay, what is our new procedure? So in the meantime, we know that we'll just plain save money by going to the local products. It's not a matter of doing it just to be benevolent. You'll literally save money in the short term. So we can't order you and can't promote some products and then forget and leave others off the list. But I know that if you walk into any of these great small businesses on the Danforth and say, point me to something Canadian, they're dying to do so.
They are. What about the so-called double land transfer tax? The pay one to the province, one to the city. Is there any way to change that, shift that, or would we be
Well, I'll tell you what my
Chow.
preference would be. It's a funny thing. People ask me about this all the time. And the interesting thing about land transfer tax, quick history lesson, it's a municipal tool. It was never meant to be a provincial tool. Land transfer tax really started post-depression in a lot of American cities, like Canada. Post-depression, a lot of rural folks were moving into the cities because they'd been devastated. Their farms were gone from the drought, and they found themselves in the city needing employment and desperate. And those cities needed money right now. And they pretty much invented the idea of land transfer tax. It was very much a municipal thing. States said, charge on real estate sales and get off our backs. And that was their solution for cities. In Canada, we still didn't have a city of 1 million people, such as they had in a number of states in the United States. In Canada, post-depression, provinces looked south of the border, heard about this new tool, and decided, well, that's clever. Let's have a provincial land transfer tax. But it was actually designed in its inception to help cities. And instead, the province started loading it into their coffer. They gave us permission to collect one, and it made sense for us to go after one that really would solve a big pressure. But we kind of hoped that over time they would phase theirs out. That the 800 million or so that land transfer tax brings us makes a huge difference to our budget. On a provincial budget of hundreds of billions of dollars, it doesn't make as big a difference. So, we had hoped that they would begin sort of backing out of that and making it more a municipal tool, but that shift hasn't happened.
Thanks, Shelley. What about the impact? When is that reassessment going to happen? Everybody's been waiting for that.
Yeah, the province has been reviewing this for far too long. The last time we had an assessment was in 2016. The province said they were reviewing it and looking at making some changes to the whole current value assessment system. And I think they're finding out how complex that would be. But here's the thing you need to know. Some people are quite stressed about the idea that, oh my goodness, my house is worth so much more than it was in 2016. I'm going to be dinged. It's important to remember that when they do an assessment, the province then sets a mill rate, if you will. It's called something else nowadays, but it's similar to a mill rate. And they also they look at how much you're collecting in taxes today, and they actually set a global amount that a city should collect. And then they set a rate that allows them to do that against the values of the houses today. And then the only shifts that happen is this neighborhood worth more than it used to be? Is this one worth less than it used to be? There's a shift between those neighborhoods, but there isn't a windfall for the city. When we do that reassessment, that won't solve our problems because by setting that global total amount, we're still in the position where the only way to increase revenue for the city is to add that budgetary increase to it once a year, every year until the next assessment. That's the way the structure works, unfortunately. It's different than, on page 4 of your tax return, you probably don't notice how much you're giving the federal and provincial governments unless you're really attuned to it. It's of course much more than you give on provincial tax, but you don't think of it because you only see that number once a year as your accountant hands you the finished return. But in those types of taxes, they realize new revenue simply by working on growing their economy. And if the economy is healthy, for instance, in the 6 days of Taylor Swift in this city, the federal and provincial government had $42 million of sales tax revenue to split between them. That's how much was earned in the city through tourism and people being out and about during those 6 days. We spent a lot on police, fire, and ambulance to be down there, but we got zero revenue from that. That's the power of sales tax and people with higher incomes spending more money. We don't generate anything from people spending power.
I do think we're trying to get something for the FIFA though. Are we trying to get a little something for the big event?
Well, we are trying to make sure that part of the FIFA bill will be paid by the people who come here to enjoy the games. We're temporarily raising the hotel tax so that We don't have to come back to property tax for more money. The visitors that will be in town will help us pay that bill to the tune of 56 million of it is the estimate of what will come from soccer fans coming over from Scotland and wherever, Italy and other places to watch the games.
Yep, there's going to be quite a few.
We hope.
We hope. It's going to be a very big
They'd
deal.
probably rather see a game here than deal with President Trump's whatever he's up to by then.
Who knows what's going to happen then? And some of the issues, Shelley, as this tariff issue rolls out over the next while, what's that going to mean to Toronto's budget? Are we able to forecast that now, or are we just going to have to wait and see and keep everybody on top of it?
Well, you know,
What do you
as a
think?
financial planner, Althea will agree with me, and she and I were in meeting with a meeting with the CFO today. It's part of the reason we have to be so careful about next year. We do need the investment to go in. We have challenges right now at this moment in the city, and this budget serves some of those challenges and helps repair the city. We need to do those things. We need to make sure people are okay because the rainy day is coming, and it may be pouring. If the tariffs proceed a month from now, we know that as the year rolls on, there's going to be a social cost because there will be job losses. There will be businesses that struggle. And so we really have to be extra disciplined. We will make these investments, but then we've got to be extra disciplined about what we're loading into a budget for the following year because we'll need to make sure that we're able to respond should we need to have some sort of resiliency measures for those employers out there that keep our people working and earning a living wage. We'll need to make sure that, if a family's having trouble and mom needs to go back to work, is she going to get childcare? We're going to work with the other orders of government and say the improvements you're making there, the differences you're making in families, you can't cancel that now. You got to keep going with that because everyone in the family may need to be earning to make up the difference that these tariffs will cause. It's things like that we got to be vigilant about, and then we're also doing some financial planning to look at if we do have to respond in some extraordinary way. How can we invest and how can we rejig some of the things that we're doing in capital to meet that and be nimble?
Thank you. Althea, can you just take us through all the next steps on this budget? This is tonight. When's everything going to happen? And then what's that rollout look like so everybody understands?
Yep. So after tonight, the next big opportunity will be February the 11th when City Council gets together to have the meeting to discuss the mayor's proposed budget. The mayor did release her budget on January 30th, which was last Thursday. If anybody's interested in seeing that, it's available on the City of Toronto website. And what I would say is that even after we're done on February 11th, the budget never ends. We sleep overnight and then we're back at it again. So that's really how our lives work in the financial planning division. So what I would say is that, of course, tune in to February the 11th, but more importantly is stay attuned to what's happening throughout the year. We report every single quarter on how we're doing against the budget. Mm-hmm. Particularly, I think, as we've discussed, the impact of the tariff is going to have, if it does go, we'll be reporting on that in a very consistent way. And then sometime in October-ish, maybe a little bit before that, we will be back at it again with public consultations. And it'll be another opportunity for us to hear what is important because, things do change and it's always important for us to keep our ears to the ground in terms of what's important to everybody who lives and resides in the City of Toronto so we can get it right in our budget process.
Thank you very much for that. So it's basically a permanent thing and it's very transparent because the meetings are all in public. They're on the website. It's really like
unlike any other level of government. And you've also learned, everybody, tonight is unlike any other level of government because we don't get all that money that came in from the Taylor Swift. And we don't get the GST, we don't get the HST, but people are coming to the city of Toronto. So you've heard a little bit about how difficult that is for us in Toronto, and how great our staff are in just keeping everything moving, keeping our city going. And I know everybody who's on here loves our city very much. And thank you for being here tonight. There's a few unanswered questions. We'll try to get to some of those, send them out to you after, but really appreciate your interest, your thoughts. And I am wearing this today because I was at a Lunar New Year event with the mayor. It is the year of the snake, 2025. On Saturday, we'll be in East Chinatown going door to door with the lions, and they chew the lettuce and make businesses prosperous for the year. And anybody who's born in the year of the snake, it's a very good year. You're very wise, you're very creative, you're going to have a transformative time this year. So it's all good if you're somebody from the year of the snake. So I just want to thank Althea, you for being here with us tonight and all of your great work. I want to thank my friend, the budget chief, Shelley Carroll. I want to thank all my great staff that are here putting the Zoom on. And I really want to thank the mayor for taking time out to join us tonight. It's very special when she's able to come and talk about the budget, because remember, Doug Ford made it the mayor's budget. At the end of the day, he gave the mayor lots of power. She didn't take all of them, but one she has to take is this is her budget, but she has included everybody in making these decisions. And with that, I really want to thank each and every one of you for being here tonight and sharing in this budget presentation and your ideas and thoughts and suggestions and your questions. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in the neighborhood.